Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing this fine Sunday morning? I hope everything's like you can hear me and you can see me. Let me know if you can't. I am waiting on my partner in crime here. Hello, hello. Hey, Jesse.
Hey, 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 good morning, good morning, good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. Let me see if I can turn my camera on. There you go.
I know, like I've
There
never
you
done
go.
this, but we're gonna roll with it and see how it goes.
Yeah, yeah, same here, same here. I have no clue whatsoever. I'm just getting used to this whole TikTok space here, but it's
I
all
know, but
good. We on it, we on it. Let's go. Vámonos, vámonos.
I know you're hitting it hard though. I was like, mira, Jesse, cómo va? Rapidito.
Yeah, I had to. I had to. A lot of people, have always encouraged me over the years, actually, jump on the TikTok space, jump on, and I'm like, and what I've known of TikTok, that's the problem. What I've known of TikTok was for, all the foolishness, the
You're not
dancing, and all the
dancing
little
on it.
shorts and stuff like that.
You're not dancing on TikTok.
Never imagined that TikTok would be such a big educational space, and I
Yeah,
tried to do it through YouTube and through Instagram and Facebook, and here I
yeah,
am. Here I
I
am.
know.
So
I share all your stuff, and I've always told you that. So I kind of just wanted to go on here. And the people that don't know me know I translate content into Spanish, and I took that up upon myself a couple of years ago. Well, like 5 years ago, right? Just because there's
mhm.
a lot of like our industry is multilingual. So I mean, and there's some struggles with like passing exam. So the point of it was to help people understand content better, not that to require the exam to be in Spanish. That was never the end goal. at this point anyways. It was more like sometimes like I have to translate things in my head to understand it better. Like and I constantly struggle with that. So that was my initial goal. I've always said I have two of my favorite educators will always be Jessie Lopez, and I've always said it, and Sarah B. Cruz, who's now a manager, but still, and our what? She's our elect president for HSPA, correct?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
believe so,
yep,
yeah.
yep. President-elect
Um,
for HSBA.
However, I think that something I noticed with Jessie when we were doing Clubhouse, remember that with
Yeah,
Joanne
yeah.
Benoit, was the passion that we share for the industry. Not only do we share this passion that often can get us in trouble, that the passion for like knowing what we know, but also we both have the Puerto Rican background, the Latino background, the having to learn these two languages and understand people, on both areas. So I think that that's I shared a lot of that with you, but I love your education because you pace it down. And so one of my biggest struggles in public speaking is, Angie, you talk too fast. That's just like, I think that's a Puerto Rican trait to speak that fast. It's just what we do. We speak like we're going to run out of time. So they would always tell me, train your speaking. So I've struggled when it comes to like presenting, um, because I talk so fast and you have to talk for this certain amount of time. I don't know what's going on here. We'll have to learn how to moderate this.
No, no, we good. I think we good so far. So far, so good. I think we just I don't know, like if anybody, it's a couple people on here, so we good. We good.
Yeah, and we'll just keep resharing it. It is early, and I think my mom's at mass, so I think it's that church time too. So, um,
Ah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
we can't cut into that time. But I figured I wanted to roll this out. I started translating some of Jesse's content. I reached out to Jesse. Jesse did okay it, right? So to make sure
Yes,
everybody knows,
definitely.
Jesse said absolutely. Um, and I aimed with his because it's very detailed, specifically with robotics. These robotic arms, the complexity of the devices is extensive, and a lot of people don't understand that it's more than 3 to 6 hours to turn over robotic devices. So that was a big reason why I went with your content. Plus, I've always loved what you do, and I saw you on TikTok, and I was like, okay, we got to do it together. Um, and just like roll this out. So what we're gonna do is Jesse will continue his education in English and I will start translating. So still his video, his content, but my voice will be in Spanish on the background. So with that being said, some of the content translated from English to Spanish. So if I struggle sometimes pronouncing things in English, being like raised pretty much in the States, in Spanish it's a even harder struggle with certain things. Like, remember one time we talked about surgical instruments in Spanish? It's instrumentos quirúrgicos. I would have never known quirúrgicos was a word. you
Yeah.
know, it's like I just didn't know that. But I have reached out to different like areas in Latin America to get some of their textbooks. There's not a lot out there. So I'm doing the best that I can, but with your stuff in English and me translating it to the best of my Spanish, of course you're gonna get some of that Puerto Rican dialect in there, and I'll try to be as medically correct with terminology as possible. I think that that will be a huge impact to the industry. What are
Yes,
your
I
thoughts?
definitely agree. And we talked about this back like maybe 3 years ago at HSPA, trying to, you know, translate some of our content. And when I jumped on the TikTok space, a lot of my viewers from there, from Chile and from, different countries was like, look, I love your content, but there's a language barrier.
Yeah,
Can you,
yeah, yeah.
can you, can you caption it in Spanish? Can you do captions in Spanish? And I was like, and that would be a great idea, but TikTok don't allow that right now. It has to be a direct language to language translation. When you reached out, I was like, definitely, most
Mhm.
definitely. So,
Let's do this.
as you stated, my videos will continue in English, and I'm trying to play a little bit with my little Spanglish on that one. Because a lot of people reached out to me. It was like, hey, if you can't do it in complete Spanish, can you do it in half and half? And as you
Hmm.
stated, when I tried to do, like, I put a video up, I struggled with a lot of those terminologies, and I'm like, man, hold on, wait a minute, let me go to my little Google Translate here because this is
Yes.
crazy. Like, trying to speak medical terminology, in Spanish is a whole different, especially for me. I mean,
Yeah.
people that know me and stuff like that, I grew up here in the States. I learned how to speak Spanish when I was 17. Even though my mom and dad didn't speak a lick of English, they spoke to me in Spanish and I
Hmm.
responded in English. So, even though I can read, write, and speak Spanish, to translate it in medical
Yeah.
terminology and professionally, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember
But
you gave
I
me
think
props
it's
for
needed.
that
It's
one.
it's no, and it's definitely needed. It's definitely because I get so many people that reach out to me and be like, "Look," because HSPA actually back then, Ishium,
Hmm.
probably in the sixth edition or seventh edition,
It was in
they did
Spanish.
have a Spanish. They did have a Spanish manual. It cost you 500 to get it, but they
Hmm.
had it. But the problem was, it wasn't a direct translation. And I
Right.
know you took on that role and tried to do that goal for a little bit, and
Yeah.
I can only imagine the struggle that is to try to do that. But in
It
this
is.
space,
We can do it. We can
definitely.
do it on here. But
Yeah.
people need to like. I think Isham tried. CBS PD as well had their the literature in Spanish as well. So I mean, I
Right.
think they both tried. Um, and again, the goal is not to get this exam in Spanish by any means. I know one of the questions I was asked, which I found so ironic, was, well, if they can't pass the exam because they're struggling with with the English barrier, with the language, how are they reading an IFU? You know how many languages the IFUs come in? You know, I mean,
Exactly.
the second one is in Spanish. That's how they're reading it.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
that. It's that simple,
Exactly.
guys. It's that simple.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Yep.
this space will be very helpful. Also, I've explained a million different times that the dialects in Latin America are so different. They're very
Right.
different.
Right.
Puerto Ricans have a very unique dialect. Our dialect is unique to Puerto Ricans only, and if you notice, a lot of it is Spanglish. Like, we don't say things like maon, we say jeans. Um, or, we don't say, what is another, hamburguesa, we say hamburger. So it's like a lot of our words are actual English words with the Spanish accent to it. So the
Correct.
dialect is different. I try to use a lot of like I said, instrumentos quirúrgicos. I wouldn't know that that was a word, but there would be like a lot of certain words that I studied books in Spanish just to get there. My next goal is to
Right.
get certified as an interpreter because that'll help us a lot. Um, but also
Okay.
another reason I like to use your content. How many certifications do you hold, Jesse?
I hold 12 currently and going for two more.
Then I always say that I'm like, it's because we know what we know that we can get in trouble,
Hmm.
and
And
that's exactly what it
and
is.
and something, Angie, that's exactly why I got into this space. In facilities, it's like you can, as a technician, you can voice your concerns and
Hmm.
know what you know. And if your leadership doesn't agree with it or they don't like it, it's not going to happen. So I made it a goal of mine to become an educator and teach the right things in the facility. But then I
Hmm.
chose to use the social media space to really say what's on my mind. That's how Stir the Pot came up. It's
Yeah.
like we talk this talk, but we barely walk the walk. And
Hmm.
until we get to that point, still processing will always be looked at as the people in the downstairs in the basement. We would
Hmm.
always be looked at as that profession that, hey, you only wash dishes, and that's not the case.
I
We need to
know.
be elevating this. We need to elevate this profession and taking this route that we're trying to do right now, and this partnership and trying to reach the masses in a different way. That's big, that's huge,
Yeah.
and if people ain't recognizing that, then they're going to be left behind. So
Yeah. I
either
find it.
jump on this, either surf this wave or watch from the shore.
I
you
know. I'm
know
like, I've never done a TikTok live, but let's roll with it. This is just how we're gonna do it. It's gonna be like the best way to voice over your content as well. But
yeah.
I wanted to discuss because there's a few things that have come up about like, facilities being like cited or in trouble for not following, IFUs and stuff like that. And you see these reports coming up. And you know what I think a big issue is, and I wanted to talk to you about this, the whole word recommended. It's not a requirement for us to have AME 79. It's recommended. How does that make any sense to you?
I mean, again, it's we that's the thing with standards. Standards are something that is going to guide us. I can tell you, hey Angie, in order to get to my house, I recommend that you go on Route 295 and don't take the turnpike. It's going to get you here. It's going to
Yeah.
definitely get you here, but there's always a better way, and that's our standards. They recommend certain things, and unfortunately, the law is not catching up to what we do, even though we have some regulatory bodies that help us out. Their presence in our space isn't the same like in Canada or in Europe, where those federal and laws are in place. You
Right.
read their standards, it looks almost like ours, but their standards say shall. We rarely see shalls in our standards.
Mhm.
So, the recommendations have to be there. And again, policies and procedures go in place. I wish we had more shalls in our spaces, but I also don't think, in all honesty, that's not going to change much either, because
No.
when you've been riding, when you've been doing things for so long, that I say it all the time, and I teach this to my students all the time. I'm teaching you the right way by the book to pass this exam, but when you get on the field, you're not going to see it. The driving test, I use
Mhm.
this all the time. Speed limit, follow speed limit, follow speed limit.
Unless you're
Yeah,
late.
okay.
Unless you're late.
Yeah, try to do that in real life, in real life. Now,
Right.
but the thing that people don't really realize and don't look at, yeah, that law is broken all the time. The speed limit law is broken all the time by everyone and their grandmother. But the consequences is what you have to deal with. And that's the same thing in sterile processing spaces. We're recommending something because we know that that is the right thing to do. You
Mhm.
choose not to do it, you have to deal with the consequences,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Right. I know that's like so. Right now I'm a manager, and I think I've been a manager like position for some time. My ideal role is an educator. The problem is that role's not really defined in a lot of states. So I know in
No.
Massachusetts, like they still are trying to pass that like required certification law. And I mean, it has not passed. They've tried and tried and tried. And it hasn't passed. So therefore, if they're not passing that, can you imagine like in Oh, sorry, I kind of lost it. My mom's trying to call me. I told her I was doing a live, but she's trying to call me on WhatsApp. You know how that works.
Yeah. Hey, hold on, mommy.
Yeah, she's gonna yell at me when I call her back, but that's okay.
Uh-huh.
Um, hang on. ¿Quién te dijo? Contesta el
Yeah.
teléfono.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
call her
yeah.
back. No, it's definitely I'd love to be an educator, but there's just no. I mean, here in this area, maybe in Boston. So I'm in Nashua, New Hampshire, so it's like borderline with Massachusetts. I typically most hospitals I worked at are Mass. The educator roles, Boston hospitals do have those, but they're rarely like across certain facilities, so they're hard to get into. Um, so the manager ends up being the educator. So now you're trying to manage the day to day, manage your budget, manage, your staffing, manage like our code of conduct, and and educate or onboard your new technicians. My
Right.
my newest struggle, and I don't know if you've seen this, but my last two SPDs, all my technicians have like less than 2 years experience. So, and like when I come on, they're like, yeah, nobody really trained me. They just kind of gave me a set and said, here you go. So it's
Right,
like,
right.
okay, so why do you do this? Because that's the way they told me to do it. And I hate that answer. I always have hated that answer. It's why I got certified. It's why I keep reading. Um, Never say, if you have to say that's the way they trained me to do it, we have a problem. Let's learn the
Yeah.
why. We do things that are super important. When you get your nails done, they have to have a licensing. They have to take a test. It has to be on their walls. When you get when you go to the barber shop, they have to be licensed, but we sterilize instruments and we don't need any of that. I find
Mhm.
it kind of comical. But we have people like you, we have people like, Hank, we have people like, Denard and, Sarah B. Cruz and Miss Green Golden that do educate to, hey, we need to learn what's important. Um, Key takeaway from this year's HSPA keynote speaker. What did you think of that?
That was a one that was the one that hit. That one, if that didn't
Mm,
make the hair stand up on your arms and made you understand how important you are in this industry, it's
hmm
it's definitely it's
Yeah,
definitely something to look at, you know?
yeah. But
But
it's definitely yeah. That was like my whenever Mr. Gleason said, keep doing what you do and stand up for someone else because I wish somebody would have done it for me. I
right,
literally was in tears because how many times did we try to say, no, I would really advise not to do this. I would really advise you that you don't take this, road. We got to do it this way. This is the correct way. And I mean, I know I've said many times, I mean, this is my professional opinion. This is like based on my technical knowledge, but it's their clinical decision at the end of the day what they want to do. We can try to stand our ground, but also putting our job on the line every time we do that. So it's like, and that's kind of like, I totally connected with him. Especially like just undergoing surgery. I was like, I made sure that my plate and my screws were done before I left that hospital the day before. It's like I had an excellent team, so I knew that everything was gonna go smoothly. But, you know, after being on that end and after listening to Mr. Gleason, I mean, I'm like, we have to continue to push this and we have to continue to educate people on what we do because most people have no idea where these instruments come from or, how they're washed. If you said IUSS to anybody, they don't know what that is. They have no
right,
idea. I
right.
still have nurses that I say, oh, we can't IUSS, and they say, what is that? I'm like, flashing. Can't say flashing. IUSS, we can't do that. Well, why do you say it like that? How long has it been since that has been changed that we cannot use that term anymore? It's been over
Yeah,
10
and
years.
son, and it's funny that you say, that the educator role isn't, universal or even adopted at many facilities. But
Hmm
something as a manager who has to educate, my role is educator and quality assurance manager.
hmm
I think we get put into a prime position that way because in a lot of places, an educator really isn't looked at anything higher above than a regular technician, and although the technicians require education, I'm
hmm
finding that a lot of managers
hmm
need education because if
Yes.
your technicians are doing a certain process because that's the way we always done it, it's because the leadership in that facility has
hmm
always done it like that. So
Right.
they need to be the ones to be educated. I always said, when we go to these conferences and I see everybody attending, the people that should be reattending that is the managers and directors of facilities
Yeah.
because they're the ones who have the power to change things
hmm
to the right way. And if
hmm
they're not changing it to the right way, the fault lies at them because come on, sterile processing is a high pace, high demanding. We deal with high turnovers. We deal with the pressure from the OR and from nurses and surgeons. But at the
hmm
end of the day, the managers are the ones that need to speak up and say, we need to slow this process
Right.
down because this is the right thing to do.
hmm Yeah,
You know?
agreed. In that aspect, I think somebody said to me, like, well, an educator is just a manager without the power to make any change. But a lot of times, managers, we can recommend things. If you work at a facility that acknowledges sterile processing as your subject matter experts, because that's the other
Right.
thing. Like, I'm all for, yeah, the certifications and, the education. But just because I don't have BSN at the end of my title, doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm doing. I have every other letter in the alphabet, you know, because I hold my sterile processing certifications, not 13 or whatever you have, but we'll catch up to you. That's the goal. But a lot of facilities are still, nursing used to run SPDs. So a lot of facilities are still going with, yeah, you have to have this college degree, but what good is the college degree if you've never worked in SPD? If you
Yeah,
can't run a
and
decon,
exactly, exactly. And think about it. I mean, even though, with these college degrees and something, I think that's a lot of my goals as well, is I want to show people that you can do it without that college degree. Because
hmm
again, the certifications, I try to educate. I still continue to learn.
right,
It's never an ending process,
hmm
and you would think that a nurse that knows what we do, or a surgeon knows what we do, but they don't. They
hmm
don't. FYI, for most people, surgeons don't know the name of instruments.
Oh God,
They
no.
just know how to use them.
So like, give me
They
the
just know how
doohickey
to
with the
use them.
thingamajig. Yeah.
It's the surgical technologist is who's schooling him, is making sure that he's using the right thing. And as a surgical technologist, the key phrase that we learn that the whole thing, if it's not clean, it's not sterile. It can't be sterile.
Right.
Surgical technologists learn the model, give me what I need, not what I
Right.
want. Because he's going to ask for something that's not appropriate for that part of that surgery. It's the
hmm
surgical technologist that's keeping that surgeon in point. So
Yeah.
understanding that is extremely important.
Right.
So education is key. I learn. I continue to learn. There's things that I haven't encountered, and I continue to try to learn it. And when I learn it, I give it forward. That's why I do what I do. Everything I learn, I give it forward, because it's no secret. Because when it becomes a secret, then we're all doing things differently. You
hmm
know.
Yeah. And I do find that, like, I mean, I think I've worked 10 or 11 different facilities, and every SPD has a different process, a different way to do things, a different, so I try to standardize. We can't do cookie cutter. There are some facilities that have these cookie cutter trainings that are just not going to fit at every facility, right? But
Correct. Correct.
I try to learn as much as I can. And I mean, some of my texts now, they're like, Angie, you just like, we ask a question and you just spit out what SC79 says. I like memorize SC79, because I just felt like I needed to know, why do we do this? My sister has had 12 abdominal surgeries. I need to know how these instruments are being processed. How, like, like, I needed to understand that, because it could be one of us. It could be your mom. It could be one of your kids on that table. It could be your spouse. And if we're doing things because this is the way we've always done it and this is the way we were trained, we could get in trouble. Or if we don't know how to read an IFU, that's an often one. You do a lot on
Yeah.
IFUs. You show the IFUs. There are managers that don't know how to read an IFU.
Correct. Correct.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I come across it all the time. It's like, oh well, the IFU doesn't say you can't do that. Well, it doesn't say you can do that either. It
mhm.
has to be clear on there. It's not as simple as saying, hey, I can remove a dry time, or I can just do whatever I want. It has to be specific. And again, we talk about it all the time. IFUs are there to guide us. They're there to show a process that's consistent and has been validated by science and consistency all the time. If we're not following those IFUs, yes, can we modify it? Yes, if it says soak for at least a minute, we can soak it for 5 if we want, because it's going to give you, more is better at some point and at certain times. But it'll tell you in that IFU, yeah, you can soak it, just do not exceed this. All right, now you know
Or
your
nor
limits.
less, nor
Okay.
less than this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now you know your limits. So yes, there's best practice, as you stated. All best practices don't fit in every facility. We don't have the same stuff. You know what I mean? We don't have the
hmm
same space. Not everyone's blessed with a borescope in every station.
Oh my
Hey,
God,
there's
yes.
facilities that don't even have magnifiers. So
hmm
best practices do not fit everywhere. But you
hmm
have to do that root cause analysis. You have to do that work, that benchmarking. Look at what's going on at other facilities and try to adopt it to make your processes better. You
Now
know?
that's the other thing. That's a good point you bring up. But have you ever felt that, like, facilities don't want to share with it? I never do content or share what facility I work for, um, because there are specific policies on that, right? So I
Yep,
never
yep.
share where I am. I just say I'm what state I'm in, but not what facility I'm working for. Um, but we're also challenged with, we can't. record on the job. We can't, like, how do we educate and talk about what we do? Are we supposed to buy our own instruments and like have our own SPDs to be able to do this? Because I mean,
Well,
again, policies on around that are
mhm.
strict.
You know, I am fortunate, you know, that I have a director that really pushes me with my education, so I'm capable of recording within my facility without revealing this facility that I work at. You know, because again, it's no secret, but again, you know, things may be seen that some people might look at and go, wait a minute, you know, like I always like one of the biggest things, you know, and I just did a video on that is, you know, wearing gloves while I'm doing assembly. Everybody always gets on me. Why aren't you wearing gloves? Why aren't you wearing gloves? Well, let me teach you why. And then I, you know, when I explain it, I said, you know, son, no, I'm going to show you why I
Yeah,
don't wear gloves, you know, or
yeah,
why we decide that we don't. But you know, it's the whole I even brought it to HSPA's attention at one point. Like I wanted to
hmm
do my own schooling and technical program outside of this, but
hmm
I understood how difficult it was to get the 400 hours. So I
yeah,
wanted to do a mock sterile processing department where I would have, you know, a sterilizer, I would have a washer disinfector, I would have an ultrasonic and some tabletop, and I had all the instrumentation. I had all of it to be able to
hmm
do it as a mock, you know, sterile processing department. I saw all the positive in it, but they decided to look at all the negative in it. Oh, they have to be in a real world. Well, I eliminate risk. I eliminate, you know, exposure to bloodborne pathogens. You know, I show you the process. Why can't we just, I avoid chemical exposure. Why can't we show the process in real time without all the risks? If more
right.
facilities and more places thought like that, it would be so much better for technicians because most technicians get into the field and you know they're like, this isn't what was in the book.
Right.
this ain't
That's
this
so
ain't this ain't
true.
it.
That's so
This
true.
ain't
It's like
it.
I will always say, I'm like, textbook is one thing, and then what we're practicing like on the field, it's a little bit different because we're working under pressure too. So, you know, when you're
Yeah.
reading the textbook, you don't have that OR blowing up the phone. And you know, you don't have
Right.
that nursing not understanding that the tray is not at room temperature. I can't release it yet. You know, now you have to explain why you can't release it if it's too hot, because we used to do it before. Well, we can't do it now. You know, why we can't hand wash
Right.
an
Right.
entire retractor set. Because we have washers for that hit a high temperature, and you know, detergents that work like a lot better in those, you know, washers. For us to hand wash an entire tray, that's super complex. So that's why we can't do it. But they don't, I mean, again, it's a domino effect when the circulator and the surge tech is in the room and the surgeon saying, you know, I want that mother-in-law retractor. And first of all, we don't know what that is. And now it's
Yeah.
like the mother-in-law retractor is probably in decon because he used it on the case before and we only had one. You know, so it's like it's a whole different situation, you know, when they're on like in the field. So I guess I can kind of understand that, but again, we're only looking at negative. Let's look at what do we gain out of tener este contenido en español y no solamente en inglés. You know, what do we gain
Hmm.
about eliminando the risk? Mira, Spanglish, see? Um, what do we gain out
Hmm.
of that? Why are we looking at, well, we're really never going to have the test in English. Ese no es el punto. We're really not going to have a perfect like SPD that has everything you need. That's not what we're trying to tell you. That we have like the pace. We're just saying if we teach them the right way when they are under pressure, then they're going to be able to do it because they know why they're doing it and they're going to be able to push themselves to that limit. The other thing is managers, if you can't do what you're asking your technicians to do it, you shouldn't be asking them to do it. I mean,
Say that again, you know, say that again because you know some people don't understand this. You know, if you can't walk that walk, don't talk
mhm,
that talk. You can't, you know, son, is crazy because I was talking to my lady the other day, and I was saying to her, you know, I'd rather learn from a crackhead not to do crack than someone
right.
who's never done it before. They're telling me that crack is bad for you. You know, a former alcoholic telling me how alcohol can ruin your life than somebody preaching that's never went through that ordeal.
Exactly.
It's not the
Exactly.
same. It's not the same, you
No.
know. So it's you're gonna sit here. I get it. Nurses, have the degree, and other professions have degrees to try to teach you or run a department. If you have no clue how to do my job, it's not the
Yeah.
same as reading it from a textbook. It's not.
It's
It's
not.
not. Put the gear on. I do. Let me tell you, nurses come to our department when they first get hired and they come through sterile processing and they got to do the process and they want to come to observe. Not with Jesse Lopez. No, indeed, you're not gonna look at nothing. You're gonna put on those PPEs and you're gonna get on that sink and you're gonna clean these instruments and you're
Right.
gonna pull them off of that case cart to see how your colleagues send them and how difficult it is for us to process those instruments.
Right.
So
Right.
you're not going to look at nothing. You're going to do the job. And after
Right.
that, when they're done, they be like, y'all got to do all this? Yes.
That's
So
when they
be
learn.
kind.
Yeah.
When you're scrubbing in and when you're in a room, be
Hmm.
kind and think about sterile processing and what it takes to turn over some of these instruments.
Yeah. Also, like we got to flip the role because I would never understood why these nurses would get so mad because the stringer's out of order, you know. And I get it now after circulating these rooms, or oh, we're missing, two hemostats. It's like, oh, you got peel packs. What's the big deal? Now you got to leave the room to go find these peel packs, and hopefully somebody restocked that per level of peel packs. So you might have to open another
Hmm.
tray. So it's like we have to like
Yeah.
also understand their point. So I mean, I worked at facilities that do that, like flip training, like let's shadow
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
like a day
Yeah.
here and you shadow over there, and understand each
And
other's points. There's a level of
son,
respect
and
that comes from that.
oh yeah, definitely. They work hand in hand. Again, it's like I had the opportunity. I started off as a surgical technologist, so I was able to work both fields at the same time. So I completely understood,
Yeah.
the relationship between and before that I was a veterinary technician and as a certified veterinary tech, you
Yeah.
do all of it. You're the nurse, you're the circulator, you're the surgical
Hmm.
technician, you're everything under the
Yeah.
sun. So I completely understood how important one role is than the other, and it's like, and when I teach my sterile processing techs, we're a service department, whether you like it or not.
Yep.
Okay. The OR is our customer. And if you
Correct.
give a customer a garbage product, they're going to have some words for you,
Hmm.
So our goal, it's part of the manual. Look it up in the CRCST. I can't tell you the chapter off the top of my head, but it's in there. The purpose of creating a pack is to meet the user's need. Okay. A
Yes.
principal fan, that package needs to be functional, accurate, and neat every
Hmm.
single time. There's a reason why we do what we do. Understand the whys.
Exactly, eso mismo. Vamos a entender el contenido en los dos idiomas y si aprendo el tercero, pues that one too, to get it out
Yeah,
there.
para
But
hacerlo
that's the
mundial.
goal.
Exacto.
Exacto, exacto.
Yeah.
And again, it's not let's eliminate the exam, and I think the exam should be provided in audio. That would be my best suggestion. You know why? I have ADHD. You know how hard it is for me to read questions and I'm calculating and it's like, yeah, the exam's written at a sixth grade level. Are you bilingual? Are you reading it in two languages? Do you
Yeah,
have
no, yeah.
dyslexia? There are things
Is
that
is it
impact.
yes, yes. I mean, again, not everyone's a great test taker, but I've had so many students like in class where I'll rattle off questions and they'll surefire, they'll think through the question and they'll regurgitate it. But as soon as they see it on paper, it's like I'm
Hmm.
like, we just talked about this. What's the problem? Like, it's
Yeah,
on paper. It's like, look, I'm not good under that
yeah,
pressure like that. But speaking to you, yeah, I do. I agree with you. I believe that the test should be available in audio or
yeah.
in face to face content.
Right. I mean, there are like hands-on learners, and but for the multilingual community, I'm thinking sometimes it's easier for me to hear something than to read it. Might not get it when
Oh
I'm
no,
reading it. I got
yeah,
to read it a few times, but when I hear it,
you,
and that's where the Spanglish comes in because we do the Spanglish thing. Like my texts know when I'm
yeah.
frustrated because that's when the Spanglish comes out. Ironically, I work in a department that my entire team is Hispanic, and they're all certified. They are. But when I come up with the Spanglish, they know, they're like, oh, something happened. I'm like, well, when
Yeah.
they say Angie, come to room 6, we got a problem. It's like they're not calling me to the room because the surgeon wants to say thank you. It's not. It's
You know,
usually,
it's
unfortunately, it's not what happens. We don't get called to the OR because they want to say, hey, you did a great job.
yeah. I just find it so crazy how part of our teaching is that we have to be diverse. We have people who learn. There's different learning styles, but when it comes to this test and this content, we
Hmm.
don't apply those same rules. We don't take in consideration that people learn differently. We don't take into consideration that there's a diverse group out there. We just want it to be one way and one way only. And
Yeah.
we got to get better with that. We got to get better.
And I
You
know
know.
both certification boards want to do that. I know I've reached out to both of them, and they want, but they also want to make sure that they're going to provide things that are going to be useful to the technician. So I guess that's where the second guessing comes in, and it's like, well, are we really doing something favorable for the community? But we see it because we're working it and we've lived it. And when people make fun of me because I can't say, it took me years to say August. I couldn't say August, or in Spanish,
Yeah.
there's certain things I can't pronounce. That's a challenge for technicians also, that could be great leaders but are afraid to speak up or put their names out there because they have that issue, but they're great, like great technicians, and would be phenomenal leaders. Um but yeah, that's that. That was a lot of talking. We went through a lot of topics there, which is why I
Yeah.
wanted to do this. But the main thing was, we're going to be doing Jesse's videos live, not live, live in Spanish. So over his content with my voice in Spanish. I don't know how we're going
Yeah.
to share it. I think I want to maybe create a joint page where those are both on there. Um,
Son, I was kind of like thinking that through last night and like how that is going to work.
mm-hmm.
But it's honestly, I think that having them on both of our pages is going to be beneficial. So the content will still be continuing minds, and then you'll voice over and post it on yours. We can just tag each other and just let it
Perfect.
be like almost a headliner. Hey, check out blah 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 space for Spanish translation, or blah 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 for Jesse's raw translation.
Yeah.
So
What
for
is
the
it that
original
I put
content.
on the topic? I said we got to be able to say it loud when we're going to stir the pot. So we
That's right.
definitely,
Hey, yeah, there you go. Put both of our trademarks on there.
yeah,
Definitely, definitely.
we
That sounds like a
definitely
good
have
idea.
to. Because say it loud.
Hmm.
Everybody's like, does that mean that you want to scream or be louder? I said, well, and that's not where it came from. Say It Loud was a brand developed by actually Lindsay Brown. She developed that for me. But the whole thing behind it is, it's speaking C-suite. You ever try to tell like your leader something and it's like, am I just saying it in a different language? Because then they'll bring a team of
Mm,
consultants in, and the consultants are like, um, she just told you everything we told you, but they're just not listening to you. So that was what Say It Loud. It's like, don't give up until you get that message across. Just learn how to say it. Learn how to get it out to them. Which is like
right.
one of like the biggest challenges that we face because we don't have that BSN, MBA, or AS at the end of our name, but we have everything else. So Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time. We should do another one of
Nope.
these, maybe like another 2 weeks or so, and see how
Oh,
the
definitely, definitely. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, because
definitely.
there's
So
a lot to
just a little,
discuss.
just a yeah. So just a little recap for anybody who just joined in late. Our mission and our goal here in collaborating together is that currently under my WDYDCSP page, I do some education, some hands-on training, showing you how we do things in the field, as well as some do's and don'ts. But
Mhm.
there's a larger community aside from the English speaking community. Angie has been working for years, trying to translate sterile processing content into Spanish for our Spanish speaking countries and those who, are curious about the field or in the field, but the language barrier is just too great or too complex. So we're taking the content that I create and we're going to translate it into Spanish. So we'll be offering the content on both my page as well as Angie's page. So if you're not following her now, well, you better start following her, because there's more to come, so that we can reach a broader range and get still processing on a standard level, right? That pedestal that we need to be on to reach everyone who can and is willing to share the passion that we share. So.
Yeah. And I mean, by no means do I consider myself a subject matter expert. A lot of people like to use that term. I know a lot, but there's a lot more to learn, like you just said. So, I mean, we're always learning, which is what I like about Jesse. He has that learner's mindset. So there's always more to come. And just because you read IFUs once doesn't mean in 6 months they didn't change them. So make sure you're changing those.
Right.
And to another point, because we talked about something real quick that I just want you to have this in the back of your head. You said there are facilities that don't have bore scopes at every workstation. There are facilities that still don't have critical water. So
yeah,
and that's a big one. Like when I see that, I'm like, why? Like what's happening? Like what can we do to change this? But no SPD is perfect. Every SPD needs work. But if we all share our information, hey, how did you fix this? How do you fix that? We can just make it so much better for everybody and so much easier. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to share what each other knows and what worked best at each facility.
Yep, definitely.
All right, so I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and start checking out my content on Jesse's page and my page tomorrow.
Okay, Angela, take care. Enjoy your Sunday.
Bye.